Sunday school continues. This is Genesis chapter 37. Now we're going to talk about. I will briefly talk about the chapter, what is in there. So in Genesis chapter 37, we're going to talk about Joseph and his dreams and how his brothers and his family, the entire family, reacted to him for those dreams. So in Genesis chapter 37, Joseph was named the dreamer because he was his favorite son, and Jacob had his reasons because Jacob was the first son of his beloved wife Rachel, and they had him at their old age. So he loved him because of those reasons, and he sewed a coat of many colors to express his love to this boy for him. So Joseph was a teenager when he started having those very important dreams, and anytime he gets this dream, he will come share it with his brothers and his father, and they started taking it differently. They grew jealous of him, and they even planned to do away with him, but they didn't know God's hand was in it. God was just trying to show Joseph what is ahead of him, and he honestly shared his dream with his brothers. They didn't know anything. They became jealous of him. So let's dive into the chapter. We're going to read in the New International Version of the Bible. So in verse 1, he says, Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan, that they are referring to Abraham. This is the account of Jacob's family. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah. Bilhah and Zilpah were maids to their mothers. So they too had sons for Jacob, his father's wives, and he brought their father a bad report about them. So Joseph took a bad report about the brothers of these women, Zilpah and Bilhah, to their father. But the Bible didn't explain what was the bad report. So in verse 3, it says, Now Israel loved Joseph more than any other of his sons. They're still referring to Jacob as Israel because his name has been changed. And he made an ornament robe for him. In the New King James Version, they call it coat of many colors. But this is New International Version. They're trying to explain the words into the simplest terms we can understand. In verse 3, now Israel loved Joseph more than the other sons, because he had been born to him in his old age. Take note. And he made an ornament robe for him, coat of many colors for Joseph. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. So did you see? King James will say they didn't speak peaceably with him. So because they knew their father loved him, he sewed this coat of many colors for him. They hated him. That was one reason the hatred came. In verse 5, it says, Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. So 2 reasons Joseph was hated by his brother. Number 1, because their dad loved him so much, sewed him a coat of many colors. And number 2, because he was having dreams, and they knew this dream meant he's going to be somebody very important in the future. So in verse 6, he said to them, Listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field, when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to mine. They were gathering sheaves in the field, and his own sheaves suddenly stood up, and their own sheaves were bowing down to his own sheaf. That was one dream. His brother said to him, do you intend to reign over us? He didn't say he intends to reign, but they are now misinterpreting it. Do you intend, you are the small one, to reign over us? You don't even know. Will you actually rule us? And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. In verse 9, then he had another dream, and he told it to his brothers again. Listen, he said, I had another dream, and this time the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars were bowing down to me. Because Joseph and his brothers were all 12 in number, Jacob had. Though Jacob had other daughters, there was one they called Dinah. So, but the 12 sons of Jacob are from then the 12 tribes of Israel came. So the Bible just focused more on them because of what is going to unfold in the future. So now Jacob dreamt the sun, the moon, and 11 stars bowing down to Joseph himself. That was his second dream. And in this second dream, he told them together with his dad. He told his brothers and his dad. So let's listen what was their response for this second dream he had for them. In verse 10, he said, when he told his father as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, what is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you? That was Jacob now asking Joseph this question. He said, yeah, you shut up there. Do you think me, your mom, and your brothers will all come and bow down to you? His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind, even when his father rebuked him. But he kept thinking about this dream he has told him, because he is an elderly man. What he has seen in life, they haven't seen it. So even though he rebuked Joseph, but he kept thinking about this dream. He kept thinking about it. So you see how matured people and young people, both of them treating the same thing differently. They grew jealous because they thought he is a younger one. Why should he be dreaming this dream that he is going to become a leader? He is going to be somebody very prominent, and they will be coming to bow down to him. So they grew jealous of him. In verse 13, and Israel said to Joseph, as you know, your brothers are grazing near Shechem. Come, I am going to send you to them. Very well, he replied. So just after this dream encounter, Jacob told Joseph, you know your brothers are looking after our cattle near Shechem. I am going to send you to go check on them. So in verse 14, he said to him, go and see if all is well with your brothers. Their dad sent him to go check if everything is okay with them and the flocks, and bring word back to me. Then he sent him off from the valley of Hebron. When Joseph arrived at Shechem, a man found him wandering around in the fields and asked him, what are you looking for? So you see, Joseph even got missing on the way going to see his brothers. So he was wandering in that bush, because where he was expecting to meet them, he couldn't meet them. So a strange man met him and asked him, where are you going? You are wandering around in this field. What are you looking for? So in verse 16, Joseph replied, I'm looking for my brothers. Can you tell me where they are grazing their flocks? In verse 17, they have moved on from here. The man answered, I heard them say, let's go to Dothan. So they left Shechem to go to another place. They might be looking for green vegetarian or vegetables, plantation. they were looking for where they can have green grass to feed the cattle. So they moved from Shechem to Dothan. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them near Dothan. But they saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to do away with him. I don't want to call the KILL word here. So they planned. The minute they set eyes on him from far, they already planned to do away with him. They said, look at the dreamer coming. We will going to see if that your dream will come to pass here. Because when we have finished with you, we will see what will become of your dream. That was their plan. In verse 19, sorry. Here comes the dreamer, they said to each other. Verse 20, come now, let's kill him, do away with him, and throw him into one of these cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams. So you see, as they saw him, they said, look at the dreamer coming. When he comes here, let's do away with him. Throw him out of this place. And we will see. And we will go tell his dad that a very dangerous animal devoured him. In verse 21, when Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him from their hands. Let's not take his life, he said. Don't shed any blood. Throw him into the cistern here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him. King James Version referred to a pit. It was a pit. This New International Version is calling a cistern. C-I-S-T-A-R-N. In the wilderness. So there was a pit in the wilderness. So, but Reuben came to his rescue because he didn't want them to harm Joseph. Reuben was the eldest brother. He was the first son of Jacob from Leah, the first wife. So Reuben interrupted them and said, no, let us not shed his blood. Because in those times, they believed strongly if you shed anybody's blood, that blood will come running after you. And they don't want it. That one individual act will go through the whole family, through a whole nation. So people who are not wicked always reason twice. But those who are not, they don't reason. They don't care what will be the outcome. But they want to accomplish their mission, their plan. They must execute their plan. So Reuben told them, we don't have to do that. Let's just throw him into that pit. But his whole plan was to come take him again when they have forgotten, back to their dad. But when he did that and he went to work, in his absence, they came and took him and sold him to merchants that were going to Egypt. They sold him as a slave. And they took his coat of many colors, killed an animal, and then stained the coat of many colors with that animal's blood. And that was what they went to show Reuben and their dad, that an animal devoured him. That is the evidence. That was their whole plan. So let's read and find out this in verse 25 now. As they sat down to eat their meal, they looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were loaded with spices, balm and myrrh, and they were on their way to take them down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, what will we gain if we do away with our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites. That was the second eldest son, Judah. He said he tried to convince him. Reuben was away, but he told them, what will we benefit if we shed our own blood? If we do away with the life of our own brother. So do you know what we have to do? The best we can do is sell him to these merchants of Ishmaelites going to Egypt. So doing that, we will get rid of him in our midst. That was Reuben's suggestion. Let's see what they said. Judah's suggestion. In verse 27, come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood. His brothers agreed. In verse 28, so when the Midianite merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph out of the well and sold him for 20 shekels of silver. This is very important. Let's take notes. Joseph was sold by his own brothers to these Ishmaelite merchants for 20 shekels of silver. Jesus Christ was sold by his disciple Judas for 30 pieces of silver. So in fact, Joseph was sold at a higher rate because they said shekels. Shekels means a measuring can. They can put a lot of silver in there, pour it 20 times. But unlike Judas, he sold Jesus Christ for 30 pieces. That means one piece. A piece like this, one piece, 30. So if you check that, they measure the silver in a shekel 20 times. They sold Joseph. But Jesus Christ was sold for one piece 30 times. These are two different things. We need to take notes. We'll come back to that in future. Take good note of that. So in verse 30, he went back to his brothers and said, the boy is in there. Where can I turn now? No, in verse 29, Reuben returned to the well and saw that Joseph was not there. He tore his own clothes. So Reuben, the eldest brother that in the first place told them not to touch him but put him in the well, came now to take Joseph from there and sneak him back to his dad. Couldn't find him, so he was worried. He had to tear his shirt. Oh my goodness, what am I going to tell our dad? What has these people done? I couldn't find this man. Then he came back to them and asked them, what did you guys do to him? I couldn't find him in the pit. Listen to the answer they gave Reuben, their eldest brother. In verse 30 now they say, 31, then they got Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat and dipped the robe in the blood. They took the ornament robe back to their father and said, we found this, examine it to see whether it is your son's robe. That was what they did, that old man. They took that boy's robe stained with blood and took it to their father. And that was the same thing they did to Reuben himself. He recognized it and said, it is my son's robe. Some ferocious animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces. That was Jacob now saying this. Then Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned for his son many days. So in those times, that's how they mourn. Tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and we mourn. Some of them will apply ashes on their body. They will not sleep on a bed. They will not eat or drink. That's how they were traditionally mourning. So that was exactly what Jacob did. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. No, he said, I will continue to mourn until I join my son in the grave. So his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. So you see what they did? They know what they did. They sold the boy to the merchants. They too went in turn and sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, who was the head of Pharaoh's guards. Let's say Pharaoh's security men or Pharaoh's soldiers, those that were guarding the king. So they sold him to the head of the guards, Potiphar. So he was in his house now in Egypt, living there as a slave. And that was the end of Genesis chapter 37. We will continue to see what really happened to Joseph and we continue from there.